In today's video, I'm going to show you how to build this app, which is based on the Dataverse tables instead of SharePoint. I built a very similar app to this, and you can check out the video up in the right-hand corner if you want the SharePoint version of this. But in today's video, we're going to take a look at how to do this using Dataverse tables. And again, it's going to be activities, so you can come through here and you can view the activities, or you can add a new activity, and it's going to be completely sortable. You can sort any of these particular columns based off what you're looking for. And then you've got the ability here to update your areas, and then you've got the ability to, again, update your sub areas as well. Very easily to add or make changes in this. But I'm going to cover how you make this app, and I'm also going to explain how security roles work to limit this down to only the user that's in here can see their information. They can't see anybody else's information. So I'm going to explain how security roles in here. One of the reasons why I do entire apps on this channel is because by watching an entire app from beginning to end, you're going to see a whole bunch of things that covers a lot of different videos on a channel. And some of the videos are really hard to title, so doing an entire app allows me to include a lot of additional information that you wouldn't necessarily see normally on YouTube videos. And finally, if you like this kind of content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. The goal right now is to get to 1,000 subscribers so that I can monetize the channel, and that'll allow to bring in some revenue so I can actually do some other things such as doing Power BI. I don't currently have a subscription for Power BI, so I'd like to be able to add that, and make and cover Power BI as part of these app builds also in future content. But the first step is to get to 1,000 subscribers so that the channel's actually monetized and pulling in a little bit of revenue to help fund some of those things. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the video. Now, our first step is we need to create a solution. So let's go ahead and create our task tracker solution. And we'll go ahead and select our publisher here. And let's go ahead and hit create. All right, let's go ahead and start creating some tables for our solution. So we'll go ahead and come down here, and we'll go ahead and add a table. And this table is going to be our area table. Now for this one, we want to make sure we're using user or team. We want the user to only see the items that they create. So we want to make sure that we're selecting the correct record ownership option here. And we'll go ahead and turn on our quick create. If we ever want to use that, it'll already be turned on, and we'll hit save here. All right, now our table's been created. We have essentially all the fields that we're going to need right out of the box. So we've got our name, and this is going to be our area. And let's go ahead and edit the column here, and we'll go ahead and change this. Now you can adjust this during the process of building the table. I always leave it as name so that I keep the schema name and the logic name as name. That way, for consistency, I know that the primary column for every single table that I've created has this as its primary name. So it's very easy to find. And then I can always go in there and adjust the display name. Now for these, as far as the requirement, it is going to be a required field. So we'll just leave that alone. And then we can take a look at our minimum character count. We don't need 850 characters here, but it is good to know that 850 is the maximum that we can use for this field type. So if we needed an area that was going to be longer than 850, we'd have to actually create that field, because the max that we can do here is 850. All right, let's go ahead and save. And our first table is done. Let's go ahead and create another table, and this will be for our sub areas. And let's go ahead and call this sub area. And here's where you could change the name. So if you wanted to call this sub area and not do it as part of the process I just demonstrated for the other table, you could change it right here. But again, there's some benefit in having all of your tables having the same primary column name. It makes it very easy to know what you're looking for when you're looking for that particular column. So just keep that in mind. And again, here, we're not going to change anything for the record ownership. We want to make sure that when the user creates this, it belongs to them. So they aren't going to see everybody else's options in here. And we'll go ahead and turn on our quick create again and hit save. And just like in our area table, our sub area table has everything by default, but we're just going to go ahead and change the name of this to be sub area. And then we'll go ahead and hit save. Now, one adjustment we might want to do is we might not want to have any duplicates in here. There are a couple different ways you can handle duplicate detection. The one I usually go with is using keys, but with this particular setup, we're actually a little limited on our options. And let me explain this for a second. So if we hit new key, we have the option of selecting the sub area. But every single user could potentially have meetings, so we can't just use sub area. What we would really need is the sub area as an option, but also created by, so that it would be unique to that user. So that, for example, a different user could have meeting in that particular situation because it wouldn't be a duplicate because the created by would be different. So this isn't going to work out of the box. There's also a way through data management where you can do duplication detection. Sometimes that has some issues running in real time when you're running from an app, unless you also do a check to make sure that the duplicate isn't already there. So one of the other great options is we just build our unique key and then we populate it with our app. So what we could do is we go back to our sub area here, and we're going to create a new column here and then also in the area table. I'm just going to demonstrate it for this table, and then I'll already do it in the area table later on. But let's go ahead and add a column here. And this is going to be our unique ID. And we're just going to leave it as a single line of text. And what we're going to do is in the app, when the user adds a sub area, we're going to add the name and the created by email address. Emails are usually more unique than using the display name. You could have multiple John Smiths, but you're only going to have John Smith 1, John Smith 2 at whatever your domain is. So it makes it unique, and that will create our unique ID in here. Now, one thing we want to take a look at is our maximum character count. Now, this field has a maximum of 850. Again, unrealistic that you'll ever fill that up, and you can reduce this, and I do actually recommend probably reducing this. But we know that it's going to be more than 100 characters because we're going to add this to the email address. Again, the email address being unique to the individual. So I think what we need to do here is we'll just set this at 850. Again, you can't go too much higher than 850 because the unique ID is byte limited to 1700. So roughly 850 is going to work. But you might want to consider reducing this so that it's impossible to exceed this, because if this was actually 850 characters and then you added the email address, this would not fit. So you would actually exceed what's possible for this particular field. Let's go ahead and hit save here. And then what we're going to do is create a primary key. So we'll come back over here and we'll create a new key. And this will be our unique ID. And we'll go ahead and select that and hit save. And now we have a unique ID for our sub area. And now we've got a unique ID for our area table as well. And one other adjustment I made in both tables is making the unique ID a required field for both. So now this and this will be required. And that's just to prevent if we have a kind of a patch or a submit form error. We want to make sure that this is being populated correctly as part of the save process, because again, this is going to control whether we have duplications or not. All right, now we can go ahead and create our last table here, and that'll be our daily task completions. And again, this is going to be a user or team for record ownership, and we'll go ahead and hit save. All right, we've got our table. Let's go ahead and change the name of this to be our activity. Now, again, this is probably where it's really important to pay attention to this character count limit. This is max 850. It can never go more than 850. So if you need more character spacing, what you're going to want to do is create a new column. You don't necessarily need to use the name column, especially if you're not going to put this into a model-driven app. If you are going to use it in a model-driven app, then you are probably going to want to populate this with information. So essentially, as part of the process, maybe the user comes up with a summarized title, and that would be what we would put in the name column. And then you would add like an activity description field, which could have a lot more character capability. So I highly recommend, if you're following along and you're actually trying to build an app like this, that you take a look at 850 characters in a Microsoft Word document and see exactly what that looks like, just so that you plan appropriately for how your users are going to use this application. Let's go ahead and hit save here. And now we have the requirement for two more fields. We have to actually do our area selection and our sub area selection. And you've got two options, well, really three options, I suppose. You can use lookup columns for each. And we could have done this on SharePoint also, but when you're working with SharePoint, especially with the Canvas apps, you get a lot more limitations if you go with a lookup column. And you have the option to do a text field again, and we will just kind of create our combo box that does the lookup for us from the application. or you could do both. So you could add the lookup field and you could add a shadow field for each one, which would give you a lot more flexibility with how you do searches and how you do different filters. So you could do that, and it's very common to use shadow fields when you do these app developments. We're going to go ahead and do lookup fields for this example, and we can always come back again later to do the shadow fields should we need to, but we're going to go ahead and add our area. This is going to be a lookup to our area table. And let's go ahead and hit save. And let's go ahead and create our sub area. And again, this will be a lookup. So let's find our sub area. And let's go ahead and hit save. All right, and we're pretty good here. So that's pretty much everything that we need. Now, one of the things you might want to consider is, are you going to make these required fields? For right now, we're just going to leave it as not required. We can, as part of the app, just make it a requirement from the app perspective as well. So we don't necessarily need to define it in here. Again, if we were doing a model-driven app, then we would probably want to define this as a requirement. And I do actually recommend that we keep these as required, but I'm going to show you how you can do this from the app first, and then I'll probably come back in here and make these required later on. Again, under the idea that we're probably going to do this as a model-driven app. There are some things to be aware of if you make these required fields. For example, you create an area. What if you need a sub area that you don't have? In a model-driven app, you can't save it if it's a required field. In a Canvas app, we can control that by going to the back screen, and you can add it in there and then go back to the screen and not reset everything, so you won't lose your work. So you have a little more flexibility in a Canvas app over what you would have in a model-driven app. So just things to think about as you're doing this build. But again, you can always come back and make changes later on, so you're not tied to the decisions that you make early on. Should the requirements change or the usage and how we want to use this app change later on, you can always go back in there and change things. Now, some other things that you might want to consider is, do you want the created on and the created by to be the fields that control everything? Now, the way that I'm building this, you go into the app. The only thing that the user has to do is basically select the activity, the area, the sub area. Oh, we also have to have our duration. So how long did the thing take? So let's go ahead and add duration on here. And then let's go ahead and we'll do a number for that. And we'll do whole number. This is going to be in minutes. So we can go ahead and add that in here just to clarify what it's going to be. And let's go ahead and hit save here. But you could also add fields for the created by and the created on. And one of the reasons why you might do that is if you're relying on the created on and the user doesn't add it exactly when they did it, and maybe that's something you're interested in, is you want to have the date and time for when the actual action happened, you might need to add a field so that the user can set that information. In this particular usage, let's say they are done for the day, they forget to do their daily tasks. The next day, when they put them in there, it's going to have that date. So that's something to consider is, do you want that to be something that is controllable? Now, there are benefits and downfalls to each approach. This requires an extra amount of data to be put into it. If you rely on the created on, what you could do is, if it's a late entry, they just have to put at the beginning of it late entry. Now, if you later on down the road, you go into some metrics and you want to see the data analytics, it's potentially possible that you're going to see that an employee has, maybe their normal workday is 8 hours. They could have 16 hours of information for all the stuff that they forgot to put in there. So that's always something that could pop up here as well. So just some things to think about when you're building this app is you might not want to rely on this. Other fields that we need are going to be our weekly update. So maybe there's a requirement in your organization for providing some sort of a weekly update. What you can do is add the ability to toggle yes or no in here. And the default choice is going to be no for this. We want it to be something that the user has to select if they want it to be part of the weekly update. And then the user could get an email at the end of the week saying, here's all the things that you put in here that were flagged as weekly update. That's something that we may cover as part of this video, or I might cover that in future content. Let's go ahead and put that in there. And for the last field, we're going to go ahead and talk about our performance evaluation. And again, this will just be a yes, no field here as well. And the default will be no. Now this is different from the weekly. So perhaps maybe you've got a weekly or a monthly, whatever the frequency is, where you have to provide an update to your manager or, a summary of everything they worked on. Most of us also do some sort of a performance evaluation at the end of the year. This would allow you to flag maybe a bigger item than say the weekly items. And maybe it's kind of like a wrap-up item that you put in there where you finish some big project. That might be your performance evaluation so that it's more summarized, a big picture kind of a thing. And then at the end of the year, as you're doing your performance evaluation process where you're telling your manager all the great things that you did, you've got a list of everything that was in there. And these days, it's really easy to take that list and put it into some sort of an AI tool and say, hey, summarize this, because you might have some duplicate information that's been entered in there, especially if you're going through and doing updates to different things or you're continuing to work on a project. An AI tool built with your app as well could summarize that into a quick summary that you could then send to your manager. So a lot of possibilities for how this is used. I'm going to go ahead and hit save here. So we've got that flag for each of our items as well. All right, so that is pretty much everything that we want for our table structure. So let's go to our apps now, and let's go ahead and create our Canvas app. Let's go ahead and find our app here, and we'll do a Canvas app. And this one is going to be Task Tracker, and we'll hit create. All right, so now we've got our starting screen here. Now for this, let's go ahead and go to our settings. And we've already got an icon. We're going to use the exact same icon that we use for the SharePoint version of this app. So let's go ahead and add image. All right, so now we've got our image. Let's go ahead and go to our update option. We want to use our modern controls and themes here. And let's go ahead and hit the close. All right, so now we can use those. Let's go ahead and add a new screen. And we're going to go ahead and add a sidebar screen option in here. And then we're going to go ahead and delete this screen here. That way we don't have to worry about setting this up from start. We've just got our main screen here. And let's go ahead and change this name to main screen. And then I'm going to change the names of all of the controls in here to main screen to start off with. All right, now we've got all of our containers renamed. Now the reason why I add the screen name at the end of each one of these, and I'll do this for everything that I add in here, is then I can take this and I can duplicate this screen once I've got it set up the way that I want. And all I have to do is hit the search option to replace main screen _1. Whenever you duplicate it, it always adds an underscore, and then however many times it's been created there. I can replace main screen _1, and it will rename every object that I've got on that screen. It's a very efficient and very quick way to adjust things on these duplicate screens as you go through and create them. All right, let's go ahead and add our image here. So this would be our, again, we're going to kind of replicate the SharePoint app. So a lot of this is going to be very similar to that design. The only thing we're not going to do in this app is we're not going to make it a responsive design. You've seen how you can do that using the SharePoint app. So if you wanted to apply that to a Dataverse-based, it's the same process. Refer back to that video and you'll see exactly how it was set up as a responsive design. Let's go ahead and adjust our height and width here. So we want the width to be parent.width, and we want our height to be parent.height. And let's go ahead and find our image, and we'll go ahead and upload that and set it. And there we go. Now we've got our landing page image for our app. Now, sometimes what you could do is you could do an image, and then you could also add maybe like the purpose of the app or a short description, some sort of a landing page description. I've used that quite a bit on apps. Also, again, a lot of times customers like to have some sort of information. You could also do some sort of a pop-up, and then you could record whether they've disabled that pop-up, but it would provide all that information. That's always an option. Also, a lot of apps use that. Here's your pop-up of the system, and you've got to read that, and you can also turn that off by checking a box so that it doesn't show up again. You can do all that same functionality inside of your apps if you want to. All right, let's go ahead and we're going to add some components. We're going to use our app header component, and then we're going to also use our sidebar navigation component for this app. So let's go over here and find those. So we have our app header. So let's go ahead and select that. And then we've got our demo site navigation. Let's go ahead and add that and import. All right, let's go ahead and add our header up here. And we'll go through and adjust some of these settings here. So our width is going to be parent.width. And instead of a round, we're going to go with square. A lot of times I like the square, so let's get rid of our border radius here, and we're going to go ahead and set that to 0, and that'll give us a square effect here. And then our component height, let's go ahead and set that to parent.height. And there we go. And we're going to adjust a couple other settings in here, but for right now, that's essentially what we need. Let's go ahead and add our logo while we're at it. I just realized we could do that very quickly here. So we'll find our logo. All right, so now we've got a logo, and we'll go ahead and change our header title. So we'll say this is our task tracker. All right, that's a good start. We're gonna have to update these after we create our OnStart variables. Let's go ahead and add our navigation over here. So this would be our side navigation. Now for this, what we're gonna do is add some on-visible properties here. And we'll do update context, and we'll call this local expand nav, and we'll say true. And let's close this. And I forgot my curly bracket here at the beginning. All right. And since we're not doing set, we have to use our colon. There we go. And let's go ahead and copy this and paste. So we want to toggle this as part of the process. And for this one, we're going to say false. All right. And now what we do is let's set our container width here. So we want to have a fixed width, and we want the width to be the same as our navigation component. So let's go ahead and say side navigation 1.width. That way it's always going to match our width here. And what that's going to do is when we collapse this, it's going to collapse the container also. And let's go ahead and select our side navigation here, and let's go ahead and set our expand default setting here to the variable that we created. So it's going to be local expand nav. So when we come to this screen, whatever we set for that screen, we could set the default to be expanded. And a lot of times on the main landing page, I'll set it as expanded, but on every other page, it's condensed so that we get the maximum amount of space available based off of this particular design to actually show the main content of the page. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a little bit. We're actually going to toggle this back and forth. For this page, it makes sense to duplicate it this way because every other page is going to be like that. And then I'll come back and change this up a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and change this to be our main screen again. And let's go ahead and change this to be our main screen. And then we'll call this our image, page, logo, main screen. All right, so now we've got that all set. Let's go ahead and save just to make sure that everything is getting saved. Autosave has been a lot better, but we do need to change this because we had our SharePoint version of this. So we'll call this our Dataverse and hit save. All right, now let's go do our OnStart settings. So let's find our OnStart here, and let's make this a little bit bigger so we got some more space. Now, I've already done this multiple times, so I'm just gonna copy and paste this in here. So let's go ahead and paste this in here. And what this is doing is it's basically creating user, and its user is defined as this. And if we go ahead and go here, we can see that we have email, full name, enter object ID, and image are options that we have just through this one function. So we're essentially exploiting that function, assigning it to user, and then what we're going to do is set our actual variables for use across our app. Now in this case, all we're doing is basically setting it as users, so we can reference this wherever we need it within our app to reference these three items. Now, most of the times I end up not using this and I go back and I delete it, but on the off chance that I need the enter object ID and I haven't created that, that does give me the option to pull that information from the GBL user variable across the application. Same thing with name, email, and image. We're gonna use those also. Now, the other thing that we need is our navigation collection. So let's go ahead and go down a little bit. And let's go ahead and paste that in. Now to get that, we're just going to select our navigation component here. And then we're going to go to the item property. And again, I mentioned this when I created the component inside of one of the previous videos, that I put this in there a lot of times so that I can copy this and paste it into our OnStart. Now you could also put this in the formula option over here if you wanted to do a named formula as well. The benefit of putting it in the app OnStart is a lot of times different user roles will have different menu options. For example, your admins a lot of times will see your admin menu, whereas most users won't see the admin menu unless they're admins. In this particular application, we're actually going to give the users the ability to adjust different settings in the admin settings, but you could also create another like developer settings or super user settings or something like that. And then you wouldn't want everybody to see that. And you can control that by using your OnStart and setting which roles can see which menu options. So let's go ahead and paste that table in here. And then all we need to do is adjust things. So what we're going to do is a clear collect. And then we're going to go ahead and name this. And in this case, it's going to be our collection nav menu. And then we're going to put a comma. And there we go. Now, in this case, we don't necessarily need all of these options. What we're going to need is our home screen for here. And then we're going to need our admin area, but we don't actually need metrics or learn. We do need a screen for entering our activities in. So let's go ahead and change the label of this to be activity. Now let's go ahead and change this to waffle. And then I already deleted the metrics. So I don't think we're going to need the metrics in here. What I might do is what I usually do for metrics is a lot of times I use Power BI. It gives us a lot of flexibility and a lot of different options we can do way beyond what you can do out of the box with a Power App. You could use and expand on what you can do from a Power App using some other options. Those are all things I might cover in future video. But in regards to Power BI specifically, that's not something I'm going to add to this channel until after the channel has been monetized and is actually pulling in a little bit of revenue. I'm already paying for quite a few things without any revenue coming in right now. And at the rate that we're growing the channel, it's going to be several months before any revenue comes in to kind of offset what we're already paying for. So that's a future function, is to integrate Power BI stuff into an application here. All right, let's go ahead and run this. And what we need to do is adjust our item property here. So we'll go ahead and delete that and set it to our collection. And now we should have our options here. And again, you could change the icons for any of these if you wanted to have a different icon, but that's essentially how we're setting this up. And that looks pretty good. I think that's a good landing page here. And let's go ahead and adjust our header bar now. So we can say our username is our GVL user name. And then we can say our user image is GVL user image. There we go. And now we've got our image and our username here. Now for this one and for most screens, we're not going to need these buttons. So let's go ahead and disable those. And there we go. Now we're ready for duplicating this page. So let's go ahead and copy this and duplicate it. So we got main screen 1. And we'll go ahead and make this one our activity page. And actually, we don't need the image anymore for this particular one. Let's go ahead and find our main screen 1. And then we will replace that with activities screen. And replace all. And then for our tracker, we'll go ahead and change the title of this to add edit activities. All right, that looks good there. And then we'll go back to here. And again, everything has been changed very quickly for this. Let's go ahead and duplicate this page again. And then we'll find activity screen. And we'll go ahead and change this to our admin center. In this case, well, I like to use centers for both like the learning center, admin center. I use the word center a lot of times over screen because with screen readers, that's what they're actually going to read. So I want it to be titled a way that makes sense for that screen. Let's go ahead and replace all here. And then let's go ahead and make sure we're on the right page. We're on the admin center. And let's go ahead and change this to admin center. And there we go. Now we've got the 3 primary screens that we're going to work on in this particular build here. And let's go ahead and test things out. So we'll go back to our main screen here. And what we need to do is adjust our OnStart. So now we have our screens in here. So instead of app active screen, we're going to go ahead and put in our main screen. And then we're going to add our activity screen. And then we're going to change this to our admin center. And we'll run that OnStart again here. Now, I did say I want to change our onVisible, so let's reverse this. So we'll say false and then true. Again, it's always good to toggle through these kinds of updates to make sure that it actually is what we want to at the end. Sometimes if you only put it in there as true, it won't actually change things sometimes. So a lot of times I like to toggle, in particular for our side navigation. Let's go ahead and play this now. So if we come over here, we've got our add edit activities and we've got our admin center here as well. So everything is looking pretty good. And we go back to our home screen and it's expanded. So I might need to go through and adjust. Again, when I build a lot of these apps and a lot of these different components, I don't necessarily fine tune. The best way to fine tune the builds of these is you actually put it into a live app and try things out. So it looks like I might have left this a little bit bigger than it should have been when collapsed. So we're not quite cutting off the very beginning of the text there. So we'll have to make that adjustment also in here. All right. Now, first thing we're going to do is our admin center items. And in this case, that's going to be our areas and our sub area adjustments. So the first thing we want to do is duplicate our admin center. So let's go ahead and make a template page is essentially what we're going to do now. All right, let's go ahead and replace that. So that will be our admin center _1, and we're going to replace that with template screen. And this will give us a screen that we can constantly replace and duplicate for all future screens that we're going to make with this. So let's go ahead and change this also so it stands out. All right, now we can duplicate this moving forward, and all we have to do is change template screen _1 for all future pages. So let's go ahead and duplicate this. And then we've got template screen _1. And we'll go ahead and do our template screen _1. And now we're going to do is replace it with our areas screen. So we'll replace all 12. And we'll come back over here and we'll move this to the bottom. I always like having my template screens at the very bottom of this, plus any other testing screens that I might create in here as well. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our area screen. And this is going to be our area updates. Now, one of the things we could do is we have an app that is exactly the same as this based off of SharePoint. And a lot of times your screen designs for things like this, or your admin center screens, your permission screens, they're the same. You can actually copy from another app all of the containers and then just paste them in here. I'm not going to do that in this particular design because I want to show you how to actually set this up with Dataverse, but it's the exact same, almost the exact same approach that we use for the SharePoint. So in theory, we could actually just copy everything over here and duplicate it very quickly that way. And then all we would have to do is change obviously our Dataverse table references. And then there's a little bit of syntax that we have to change for some other things. But for the most part, we've already built kind of a cookie cutter page design that we can quickly reuse across all of our apps. Now, in this case, we're going to need a back button. So let's go ahead and make our back button visible here. And then our back on select, we just want to put in there back function. And we can go ahead and close that out. All right, so now we've got the ability to go back and we've got our area update screen. All right, and let's go to let's actually clap all this stuff. So we don't need all this stuff clogging up our view. And let's get rid of all these and these. All right, so now we can focus just on our area screen, and we'll even collapse that also so that all we have here is our area screen. Now for our main container area, this is the primary area that we need to work on for this app. Let's go ahead and add a container. So we'll find a container. And in this case, we're gonna do a vertical container. And let's go ahead and add another container here. And again, that will be a vertical container. So we'll have 2 vertical containers here. And let's change our orientation. So we're essentially going to have our gallery on the left and our form on the right. So let's go ahead and do a horizontal container here. And let's go ahead and separate the gap here. We'll put maybe 10. Actually, pretty much everything is 16 around. So just to keep things consistent, we'll have 16 here, 16 here, 16 here. So pretty much everything is 16 here. And let's go ahead and change the name of this. And this will be our container gallery controls area screen. And then this one will be our container form controls area screen. So we can keep things organized here. Now we don't need this to be a drop shadow. So let's go ahead and remove the drop shadow on this. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and get rid of the border radius for these things as well. So we'll have kind of a square look on this. All right, let's go ahead and add some more containers on this side. So we'll need essentially a couple different containers because we're going to have our search bar at the top, and then we're going to have our header for the gallery, and then we're going to have our gallery. So we'll really just need 3 containers probably. So we'll do a container here. We'll go with the horizontal for that search bar. And let's go ahead and add another container. And this one will be, again, a horizontal container for our header for the gallery. And then let's go ahead and add our gallery container. And for this one, we'll do a vertical container. So we've got our 3 galleries here. Now for this one, let's go ahead and actually we could probably do this for all 3. So let's go ahead and select all 3 containers here. And we're going to go ahead and set this to 0 and get rid of our drop shadow. And then for this one, we'll go ahead and do a flexible height. We don't want that. And let's go ahead and set it to 42. Now this is going to be our search. So let's just go ahead and add our input option here. And that'll be our text input. Let's go ahead and adjust our container here. And we'll go with the left padding of 15. And let's go ahead and center everything here from top to bottom. All right, that looks pretty good. We want to change our width here. So let's go ahead and adjust our width. And we want that to be our parent.width minus 30. So we've got the gap the same on both sides here. And then we go ahead and add our placeholder text. And for that, we'll add our search in here. And we'll go ahead and say search areas. There we go. So now we've got that popping up in here. And let's go ahead and do our key press. We want the gallery to update automatically as they're typing things in here. So we want to use the key press for that. All right, that's looking pretty good. All right, I know what I forgot to do is set up our theme. So let's go ahead and do that right away. I always add a theme for everything, and it's my Office Solutions Pro, and I set it to Arial, and then it is 0770 Bravo 8, and hit create. There we go. So now everything's got the right coloring and everything's looking the way that it's supposed to there. All right, now we go ahead and adjust this one. And for this one, again, it's going to be a flexible height of off. We want to set this to 25. All right, that looks pretty good there. And we're going to add one text box. And we'll go ahead and set that height to parent.height. And the text for this one is just going to be the row header for area. So let's go ahead and put that in there. All right. And we'll go ahead and put the padding at, say, 10 here. And we can adjust that later, just like this. And we're going to go ahead and make the font here bold. And we'll go ahead and make this 16, make it a little bit bigger. All right, that looks a little bit better. All right, now we are ready for our gallery. So let's go ahead and add our gallery in here. And we'll do a vertical gallery. And this one's going to be our area table. Now, we haven't added any of our tables here. So let's go ahead and find a table. So we'll select area. Perfect. All right, now in this case, we don't need the image here. So we can go ahead and delete this, and this. We're going to go ahead and use our modern controls for this, so we don't need any of these. All right, now we can go ahead and add a text to this. Oh, and let's move that up here. All right, perfect. So now we have our text, and we'll go ahead and set that to 10 so that it is at the same place as our area is. And let's go ahead and increase the width of this. And we'll go with parent.width, and we want to subtract. We'll go with 120 because I think we're going to have roughly the same number of buttons as we did before. And let's go ahead and change the text of this to this item dot, and we don't have any entered in there yet, so that's fine. Let's go ahead and adjust the color for this to black. Now we're going to have our template height be 42, so let's go ahead and change this, or let's go ahead and change our gallery color, and I like F5 for that. There we go. That gives it a little bit of a standoff there. And let's go ahead and take a look at this. So we don't want our width to be any bigger than our gallery.template height. And we can go ahead and copy that so that we have our height and width for this be the same. So we basically got a square for this, and then we can go ahead and change this to, I think 11 looks good. Yeah, that's not too bad. And let's go ahead and copy this, and we'll go ahead and paste it. And we'll change our X value here. So self.width minus 12. We want it to have self.width times 2 since it's the second button here. And this is going to be our delete button. So let's look for our trash. All right, perfect. And let's go ahead and work on our onSelects next. So we'll look at this one first. And for this one, what we want to have happen is update context. And let's go ahead and just kind of fill that all in here. And this is going to be our area selected. And we want it to be this item. And then we want to do edit form will be next, but we don't actually have our form yet. So we're not going to put the edit form in here quite yet, but that'll be the next thing we do. And let's go ahead and copy this. And we're going to want to do our onSelect for this. And for this, we want to remove from the areas table this item. And then we want to do our update context, and we want to set this to blank. All right, there we go. Now our default item on our gallery, we want it to be our local area selected. So let's go ahead and copy that. And let's go ahead and find our default, and we'll put that in there. All right, it's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and work on the right side here for a little bit. So let's go ahead and add a container. And this is going to be our button container at the top, so it's going to be a horizontal container. Now let's go ahead and add another container in here. So this will be a vertical container because this is going to hold our form. And we'll go ahead and set the height for this to 42 because it's going to have buttons inside of it. And we'll go ahead and add our form in here, and that'll be our areas. All right, now we don't need most of this. We don't need our record created on, doesn't really matter. Our status doesn't matter. Our status reason doesn't matter. This doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. This doesn't matter. All right, that's looking pretty good. We don't need this one. And we can go ahead and change the adjustment here. So we'll put this towards the top. And let's go ahead and change this to parent.width. And we'll do the same thing for this one. But while we're working on, this one doesn't matter as much, but let's go ahead and do the same. So we'll do parent.width. We're actually going to make this not visible after we get everything all set up. And actually, since we're talking about it, let's go ahead and just do that right away. So we'll do unlock, and then we're going to take a look at the update property. So what we want to have happen here is we want it to be this data card's value. So we're going to take a look at that form. And for our area, it's going to be data card value 8. So we'll just go ahead and copy that. And the update is going to be, we'll move this down so that I add the reference later on, dot value. And then we're going to add a hyphen in here. And you could add spaces if you like to have a space between things, but for this, it really doesn't matter. And we're going to add our GBL user email in here. And essentially what that's going to do is it's going to set the area, so the text, maybe it's meeting or maybe it's a project or whatever, put a hyphen in there, and it's going to add the email address. And this is going to be used for that duplication rule that we had so that we don't have the same thing being repeated over and over and over again. Now we're going to hide this eventually, but for right now, again, we'll just leave it visible so we can test and make sure things are working correctly. Let's go ahead and add some buttons here. So we'll look for our save button. And let's go ahead and adjust this. So we'll go ahead and move it over to the right. And then we'll center this. And we'll adjust the button's height here. So we'll do our height. And that'll be parent.height. And we'll go ahead and copy this. So we get a square button. And we'll go ahead and paste that in here. So if the height does change, it will change the size of this. And since our colors over here are black, we're going to go with black here also. So we'll go ahead and add a padding of 5. And that's not too bad. Let's get rid of our border style. And let's do the same for both of these buttons here. All right. And let's go ahead and put this in a little bit. So we want to have our right padding of 20, and we want a gap of 10. All right, now we can copy this and paste this in here. So this is going to be our add button. So let's go ahead and change this to the add. All right, now let's take a look at our accessibility labels. So for this one, we're going to say the tooltip is going to be save area, and then our accessibility is going to be self.tooltip, and then for this one we're going to do add area, and this will be self.tooltip. There we go. And this one's going to be view item details, self.tooltip. I like that. And we'll have to change this one to delete item. All right, so now we've got all of our buttons kind of set up here. Now for the on select here, we want to do submit form. And that's form 1. And then for our add button, let's go ahead and set the on select to new form, form 1. All right, I think we're getting pretty close to setup, but let's go through and change the names for pretty much everything that we've got here. All right, so I went through and renamed everything. So now we're pretty much ready for a couple more steps and then we can test this. Let's go ahead and change our on success for our form here. So let's take a look at this. And what we want to have to do is update context. And again, it's going to be our variable that we created. And we want to make sure this is self.lastSubmit. And then let's go ahead and add another. And we want to do edit form. And that'll be our form area screen. And we want to have a notification. So we'll do successfully updated. And we'll do a notification type of success for 3 seconds. All right, that is looking pretty good there. Now let's go ahead and test things out here. So let's go ahead and play. Now we have no item to display, so we can adjust that also, and we can add a little text box that says something a little bit different here. We have to adjust our drop shadows. So a couple things we still need to adjust here. Let's go ahead and we gotta change a couple more small things here. So let's change our item. So this is gonna be the item that we created. All right, so that's in there now. And let's take a look at our form or our container drop shadows here. So let's get rid of that. And let's do the same for this one. And let's go ahead and get rid of that also while we're at it. And we did that one already. We'll go ahead and add our text in here right away. So we have our form. Let's go ahead and add a text box here. And we want this to be parent.width, the same as our container. And same thing here, we want this to be parent.height. And for our text, let's go ahead and put in here something like select an item to view or update, or add a new item. All right, that looks good. All right, let's go ahead and change this to 24, and we'll make this bold. And let's change our padding with a little bit of an offset there so it's not right up against the edges. And for this, we want to change our visibility here. So let's take a look at the visibility property here. And we want to do is blank. And that's going to be our variable that we created. And our form dot mode is not equal to form mode dot new. Oops. Dot new. All right. So then that'll be visible there. Now we have to adjust the visibility property for our form. So it's like that. And very similar to what we just did, we're going to do a not is blank, and then our variable, or our form area dot mode is equal to form mode dot new. And there we go. All right, so let's go ahead and adjust our text here a little bit. Change the name of this. We'll say this as label not item selected area screen. And then we want to make sure that we put this in the middle and in the middle. All right, that looks pretty good. So that'll display whenever something's not selected over here. So we won't get that generic message that pops up there. Let's go ahead and give it a shot. So we'll hit play here. Let's go back to our main screen, and then we'll go to activity, and we'll go to our admin screen. All right, so everything's looking good here. Let's go ahead and add our buttons to our admin center that'll let us get to this. So we'll add a button. Let's go ahead and put a gap of 15. And then we're going to go ahead and change our align to the center here. And we'll put a little bit of a gap at the top. So we want 15. That looks good there. Actually, we need to have a text control. So let's insert text. We want the text to be above. So we'll just drag this up. And let's go ahead and make this our admin options. And we're going to have to make this a little bit wider. So we'll make this 150. And let's put this in the center. And then let's go ahead and make this bold. Yeah, that looks pretty good there. All right, so our button is going to be area update. And we'll go ahead and put the edit option on here for that. And let's go ahead and make the width of this button 200. Yeah, that looks okay. All right, so let's change our on select. And for this, we're going to navigate to our area screen. We're going to use a screen transition cover right. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our accessibility label for this. And we want that to be update areas. All right, let's try the button out. And that worked perfectly. And we've got this showing because we don't have anything selected. If we hit the add button, we have the option to type in the box. So let's go ahead and try this. So we'll go ahead and say task tracker. And then for our unique ID, that's going to be populated when we hit save. So let's hit save. And now we've got task tracker. And then we've got the email address that follows. So this is working exactly as expected. Now let's go ahead and add another one. And we'll do task tracker and hit save. And we'll see area failed. It is not a unique entry, so it won't let us create it, which is exactly what we're looking for. So let's go ahead and change this to task tracker model driven app. That might be something I do in the future, and hit save. And perfect. As expected, it puts everything in there the way that we want it to. All right, let's go back into our app. Now we can go ahead and make this not visible. So we'll go ahead and toggle that off. We don't need to see that anymore. Every time that we edit this, it's going to automatically update that unique ID. So it will stay in sync. So you could create one, edit it, maybe you add a extra space or something like that. It will do all those things for you automatically. All right, let's take a look at our gallery now. So we want to adjust our item property here, because right now we're not doing anything. Now we don't need to filter by the user. The user is only going to see their item. So we don't have to actually filter this by who created it in this particular app design, which is a great aspect of working with Dataverse versus using SharePoint lists. And we haven't created that yet. We're gonna do the security rule for that towards the end of this video. So definitely stick around to see how this works for setting that up. But we're not gonna have to worry about setting that filter in here. Now, because we use Dataverse, we actually have a couple different options we can handle this, and all of the options are gonna be better than the options that we have using SharePoint. So let's start with the first one, and we'll just do a filter. So we'll filter our areas, and we're gonna go with is blank. And then it's gonna be our search box dot value, or our search box value in our area. And in this case, it's going to be our name field. Again, we had that name field, right? But we changed it to area. So we're seeing the information here. So that's what we're looking for, is this one here. And let's go ahead and close this out here. And there we go. So let's go ahead and hit play and see how this works. So we're not doing starts with, so we can actually look for anything. So let's look for model. And there we go. We found our model-driven app. Or we could search for app, and we're going to see that. Or if we look for task, we're going to obviously see both options. So it's way more capable of a search, especially since we're doing a text field just out of the box. We don't have to worry about the starts with, so you can only look at the starting of essentially this thing. So that's one option. This is a good option, but in this case, because we're only dealing with text, there's actually a better option. So let's go ahead and get rid of this, and we'll put our areas back in there. We actually have the ability now to use the search option. So let's go ahead and set that up. So we'll do if, and in this case, let's just move this out of the way so it's not causing us any problems here. And we'll do our is blank again. And again, we're going to look for our text search box dot value. So if it's blank, then we want to look at our areas. Otherwise, what we want to do is search. So we'll do search areas, and for this, we'll just go ahead and copy this and paste. And what we want to look in is, again, our area OSP name. And then we can go ahead and close this. And we got to close out our other one. And there we go. So now this search, and we can go ahead and hit format text here so it's set up the correct way. So this is actually a more capable approach, because you can actually search in multiple columns. Now we only have one column, so it doesn't really matter, but we could add multiple columns in here just by adding a comma on here. You could pick from any of the other text columns very easily. So a way more capable option over name. Now you can set up name to work kind of the same way, but for this setup, I think this works a little bit better. So we're going to use the search instead of the in function. But in this case, we have options, which is way more than we have with SharePoint. And that's kind of why I wanted to show this approach here. Let's go take a look at this. We want to have this wrap, so we've got that set up correctly. It looks like we've got everything on this page ready to go and set up. Now I do want to change our container a little bit. So if we look at our whole container for the main container, we wouldn't put that gap of 16. I want to go ahead and change our background color here and make it a little bit darker. And of course, that's going to make it so we have to adjust all of our other containers. So let's go ahead and collapse these. And we're going to go ahead and set this container to white. And then we're going to set this container to white also. And I'm not doing the entire container because I don't want the gallery to be against a white background. But on our other side, we can set everything here to white. And we've got a little bit of a gap there that separates these two areas. So everything's working the way that we want it to do here. Now, what we might want to do is add some padding over here. So let's go ahead and add a padding of 10. All right, so let's take a look at how this looks. And everything's looking pretty good there. I think we're set up on the area updates. Now, it's as easy as duplicating this for our sub areas. All right, so let's go ahead and collapse this. And then we've got our sub areas. So let's go ahead and change the name of this to sub area update. And then we can do area screen 1 search. So we'll do area screen _1. And we'll call this our sub area screen. And we're gonna make sure that we're only on this one page. And yes, we are only on that screen. And then we're gonna replace all. All right, so now our page is completely set up for sub areas. All we need to do is adjust some of our variables in here. We don't necessarily need to adjust the variable that we created for area, but I always like to keep the name consistent with what I'm doing. So I would change it to local sub area selected or something along those lines. And then we would change our data sources for both the form and the table. And then for the most part, we're ready to go. But essentially you would look at everything that you created for the area screen and you just make some adjustments there so that it works for sub area. All right, so I've gone through and made all the adjustments, and the common things that you miss are just changing this because that requires manual adjustment. And then your accessibility tooltip type information, just gotta do a once over on all that information. But for the most part, it really just is easy as changing your item property to include sub areas and then changing your form to be the sub area also, or whatever the other form is. But duplicating becomes very, very easy when you use kind of a standardized approach like this to creating your screens. Now, some things we might want to adjust is we take a look at this. We didn't actually adjust a couple different things in here. So we might want to do our font weight, for example. So instead of regular, what we can say is if, and we'll give ourselves a little bit of a space there. And this item dot, again, it'll be our sub area, is equal to the variable that we created here, dot same. Then we want to have bold or regular. Make sure we put that in there. And we'll go ahead and close this. And that will make this bold whenever it's selected. And we can go ahead and copy this first part here. And then we can take a look at our template fill. And right now there isn't a template fill, but we can go ahead and adjust this. So we'll go ahead and put that in here. And then we'll put a RGBA of 224, 224, 224, and 1. And let's go ahead and close this out. And then we'll get a little bit of a contrast there to make it a little darker to know that we're selecting that item. So that's just a little bit of additional thing that we can do here to make this gallery look a little bit better. Now, I also like to turn off the borders here. So let's go ahead and do that for the form and then also for the gallery. Now I've applied all these same changes to our area gallery also. And with that, we're ready to work on our activities screen. So we've got both of our screens updated. We do need to add a button to our admin center here. So we'll just copy this and paste it. And we'll go ahead and change this to our sub area. And we'll do update our sub areas. And there we go. So now we can work on our activity screen. So if we go over to this screen here, we will now be able to modify this. Now let's go ahead and add some containers. And we'll go ahead and add a vertical container. And then we'll go ahead and add another vertical container. And this is going to be very similar to what we just did in the other screens. So we'll add 2 vertical containers. And let's go ahead and change this out. So we want to make this a horizontal container. So it's, again, side by side. So our gallery table will be on the left side, and then our form will be on the right side here. All right, let's go ahead and add our containers on the left side. Now for the left side, we're actually going to add a search option on here also. So we're going to add another container here, and this will be a horizontal container for our search. And then we'll add another container in here for our viewing control here. All right, now on this side, we'll do kind of the same thing. So we're going to have our button container, and then we'll go ahead and insert another container here for our form. And let's go ahead and select both of these and get rid of our drop shadows. And let's go ahead and do the same for these two. And then we'll go ahead and adjust this side as well. So this will be none. And same thing for this side. So we'll have that as none here. And then for our main container, we'll go ahead and put a gap of 16, put a little bit of space between this. And then we'll go ahead and rename all these containers quick. All right, now we've got all of our containers renamed. Let's go ahead and adjust these. So this is going to be our fixed width. It's going to be for our save, and buttons basically are going to be in here. Now in this case, we're going to just copy some buttons from our other screen since we've already got them kind of set up here. So we'll just go ahead and copy these two here and then go back to our activity screen and then paste those in. And then we'll just go ahead and adjust this. So we want this to be over on the right and centered. And then we're going to put a gap of 10, and we want our right to start 20 in. So let's adjust that. All right, so now we've got our buttons in here with the gap of 10. And let's go ahead and add our form. And this will be our daily task completions. All right, I went through and already made it a single column and removed all the excess columns that we didn't need to pull into this. And now what we can do is change the name of this. This be our form activity screen. And we can go ahead and adjust our save here. So we have form area screen. We don't need that. So let's fix this to be our activity screen form. And let's go ahead and take a look at this and set our new form here correctly also. Now for our on success, we're just going to go copy that from our other screen again. Again, why not? Save us a little bit of typing that we don't need to do. So we'll go back to our activity screen and use that and just make some adjustments to this. So let's go, and this is going to be activity selected. And again, we have to change our form here. So let's go ahead and change that out. And everything else looks fine for this. And our item property is our activity that we just created here. And that's looking pretty good. Let's check. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit smaller here. And everything's looking fine. Let's change our border while I'm looking at it. So let's change this to none. Now, what we might want to do is give ourselves a little bit more space, and we do want to limit this one. So this is 850 characters of a max. So let's go ahead and adjust this so they can't possibly go over that. It'll basically cut them off from typing as soon as they hit 850. So if they copy and paste, it'll also cut that off out of there. So let's go ahead and change this to multi-line. Now we do want to make duration a requirement. So we're going to go ahead and unlock this field. And then we're going to make this a required field. And this is where you don't necessarily need to do it inside of the Dataverse table. You can control this from in here also. And in this case, we're going to make these both optional because you could have something that it isn't a weekly update, it isn't performance evaluation. You just want to keep track of what you did. But let's go ahead and change the order of this. So we want weekly before performance. And that's subjective. It can be whatever you prefer. I just prefer doing a weekly and then deciding if it's something I want for the entire year. So that would be kind of my approach. And let's go ahead and change this out, and we'll use a toggle. So let's go ahead and find our toggle control here, and we'll unlock and add that. And let's go ahead and kind of line this here. We want this to be, or checked will be this item dot weekly update. Let's go ahead and delete this. And then we're going to adjust a bunch of stuff here. So we don't need this anymore. And let's take a look at this. And now this we need to change. So let's find our toggle's name here. So it is toggle 1. Let's go ahead and change this to toggle weekly update. And let's take a look at our options here. So it's going to be toggle weekly updated dot check. And we're going to say if toggle weekly update is checked. And we're going to say, we're going to find our weekly update option here. And if it's checked, we want it to be yes. And if it's no, then we want it to be no. And let's close that up. And there we've got it updated. Let's go ahead and select this toggle and let's go ahead and make this a little bit wider here. So we'll say this is 125. And we can see we've got a label here. So what we're going to do is change our label here. So we're going to say if toggle.weeklyupdate.checked, we're going to say yes or no. And as we can see here, we've got it set to no right now. Let's go ahead and copy this. And we're going to go ahead and paste this in and we'll unlock and add. And again, we'll just move this over and we'll delete this. And for right now, again, we're going to delete this Y value option here because it's not really relevant right now. And then we'll come back over here. And now we have to change our toggle name. So we'll say, oops, got to select it and edit it first here. Where'd that go? So that was our, there we go, toggle weekly update. And this will be our performance eval. All right, so now we can edit this and we'll say, again, toggle performance eval dot check. And what we're going to say is if, and we'll say again that performance eval. So let's find that dot yes, or it'll be dot no. All right, perfect, just like that. And now we need to adjust our label for this. So again, this will be our, oh, that looks good. That's the way that it's supposed to be. All right, so that looks pretty good. And I think we've got everything that we need now. Oh, let's make this a little bit taller while we're at it. So we'll change our height to 64. I think that'll give us enough space. What you would want to do is put in 850 characters and see how much space you have, because you got plenty of room here. So you could make this bigger, but we don't want to make it way bigger than what they actually could put in the box. But that would be one thing you'd want to test, is put 850 characters in this and see exactly how much space that is. And then just kind of maximize the space so that you don't have a scroll bar here if it's avoidable. And I think that's it for this side. So let's go ahead and take a look at our other side here. So again, this will be a flexible width. And again, we'll put this at 42. And now in this case, all we're going to do is copy our search box from this screen. So we'll copy this because it's already formatted for us. And then we'll come back over here and we'll go ahead and paste this in here. And all we have to do is adjust this to put it into the center again. And we'll put it in the center here, and we'll just change our text here. So it'll be search activities. And there we go. Now what we have to do is add our table in here. So let's do that quick. So we'll find our table control and put this in here. And again, this will be our daily task completions. And let's go ahead and adjust our width. In this case, I typically leave this in here so that I can use it if I want to in the future. It's already set up for me. And then we'll do parent.width. And then we'll do the same thing for our height. So again, I'll keep these in here so that I can use it again. And there we go. So we've got our parent.width and our parent.height. Let's go ahead and adjust this. We don't need our status, so we'll remove that. We don't need our status reasons, we'll move that. And then we'll go ahead and move our weekly update further to the top here. Now we might want the record created on, so we'll leave that in here for this particular use. But what we might want to take a look at is, if we look at our table control, let's first rename this. So we'll say table activities. And then we'll take a look at our record created on. We don't necessarily need that to be as lengthy as it is. So we'll just say date created. All right, so that looks a little bit better. Now we don't necessarily need this side to be as wide as it is. So let's go ahead and adjust our form side to be a little bit less wide. So we'll go ahead with a width of 400 and see how that looks. And we want to kind of maximize our space over here. What we will need to do is adjust our form to make sure that it's fitting correctly. So we want to have our minimum width of 1. And then let's go ahead and take a look at our width control down here. And we want to make sure this is set to that width. And then we'll go ahead and adjust our width for all of these controls. So let's go ahead and collapse these. And we'll select each one. And we'll say parent.width. And there we go. And since we've now made this a lot smaller, let's go ahead and make this height a little bit taller. We'll go 400. No, that's a little too tall. So let's try 350. And there we go. That fits perfectly in there. Oh, yeah, I like that. Now for our container, let's go ahead and change the background color again of this one. So we'll go with our a little bit darker here, and then we'll have to obviously adjust all of our containers. So let's adjust the form one first, and we'll go with white for that. And then we'll go take a look at our container on this side. And again, we'll go with white for this. And there we go. That looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and test this out and see how it's looking here. Let's go ahead and play here. Now we didn't add our text field in here, so let's go ahead and do that quick. So we come down here and we'll again just copy our text from here. So we'll go to our form here, collapse this, and then we've got this one here. So we'll copy that, go back to our container over here, and find our form here and put this into this container here. And then we go ahead and edit this because we didn't use that. So let's go with activity. Oops. And again, this is the form that we need here. So let's find our form. And there we go. Now, what we will have to do is adjust our form the exact same way. And in this case, we'll go ahead and select our form control over here. So we don't, again, have to copy that. It's already preset for us. So we can just copy this and then make some adjustments to it. And we'll select our form. And let's go ahead and find our visibility property here. And we'll go ahead and paste this in. And again, it's activity. And then we'll just change it to the correct form. All right, so we've got that working correctly. And let's go ahead and play again here. So if we hit the add button, we'll have the ability to type in the box here. And we'll be able to put our duration in here. So we'll say 15 minutes. And we'll do weekly update of yes and hit save. And there we go. So it updated correctly. We have everything in there that we put in here. Now, how table controls work is it will scroll the activity information here. Again, we can select it. We haven't set this up yet, but we'll be able to select each of these and then we can read the expanded if we want to do it that way also. You could also use a gallery control over here. So you could set this up with very customized approach. Maybe the activity box is a lot bigger and then you have another row underneath of it that includes some of the other information. So you've got a lot of flexibility on how you set these things up. And you don't also have to include all of the information on here if you don't want to. Again, you can just click on it and kind of look at it from there. But that's not bad. I think that looks pretty good, especially for not completely finishing everything on this. And if we hit add, again, we have the ability to add another one. So we'll say Quest Edition 2. And this one we'll say is 20 minutes. And we'll do a performance evaluation and hit save. So exactly what we're looking for. Now let's finish setting up our table control because we didn't actually do anything with this. So let's change our item property here. And again, we want to be able to search. So we're going to use our search option here. All right, let's go ahead and enter here and we'll do if it is blank. And it'll be our search for the activity screen here. Dot value. We want to have our daily task completions, all of it. Otherwise, we want to have our search of daily task completions based on our text search input activity screen dot value and our activity column. And let's go ahead and close this one and close out our if. And there we go. Now we've got the ability to search through this. Now let's also take a look at our on select for this. So we can go ahead and set this as update context. And go ahead and local activity selected. And that'll be table activities.selected. All right, so let's go ahead and do our edit form activity screen. All right, let's play this and see how this works for us. So if I come up here and search 2, I only get the 2 in here. And if I remove it, we'll get everything again. If I select this one, I'll be able to see the one we've selected here, or test edition 2, and we can see that our toggles aren't working. So we're going to have to go through and check that out. Now I also fixed the date created here, other option, but it should have been the created on instead. So I've gone through and adjusted that. All right, let's go take a look at what's going on with our checkboxes here. So now when we look at our weekly update, everything looks correct here. Let's go ahead and look at our performance evaluation. And we copied and pasted this, but we forgot to change this. So let's go ahead and change that. All right, so that looks like it's working. Let's go ahead and select this one, and it works exactly like it's supposed to. So we just forgot to adjust that property there. Let's go ahead and test this again. Now, let's go ahead and create one. Now for this one, I went and got dummy text at 850 characters. And if I try to continue typing, I can't anymore. So it will cut off there. And that's exactly what we're looking for this. Let's go ahead and set this to 30 minutes. And for this one, we won't select either and hit save. And there we go. Now we've got an example of what it looks like with 850 characters using this table. Now, again, you could swap this out for a gallery, and then you could make this quite a bit bigger. Most of the time, especially when you're talking about lengthy, you're going to want to actually look at it in here. And actually, that's not too bad. We don't have to scroll too much for 850 characters. You could give yourself some more room over here if you shrink this down a little bit more. And now that I'm looking at this, we actually forgot to add our areas and sub areas. So let's go ahead and adjust this quick. So we'll go ahead and select our form here. And let's go ahead and add our area and then our sub area. Now we might want to put these above our weekly update and our performance there. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. We'll have to adjust the width for both of these also. So we'll select both of them. And we'll go ahead and set this to .width. All right, now we can go ahead and adjust these. We'll go ahead and make the placeholder item to be select area. And we'll do the same thing here for sub area. All right, so there we've got that. Now, we don't have them over here, and that would be the kind of the question for how you plan on using this. Do you want that over here as displayed? Do you want that only over here? Maybe you don't care about the weekly update or performance evaluation and you care more about these, so you can swap them out, or you could put all of them in here. You can kind of do whatever you want as far as how you set this up. Now, another design option you can do, if you want to have the full screen real estate here or more of the screen real estate, what you could do is you can move the add button over here, and then you could actually hide this entire section here. And you would only display it when you're clicking this, or you'd have the option to hide it here. So those are some things you can do to give yourself some more real estate to work with on here as well. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this. And let's go ahead and select our area. So we created the task tracker, and we've only got the meeting option. Let's go ahead and save that. Yeah, everything is working as expected. And let's go ahead and add them here so we can see what that will look like. So if we go and put that here, let's go back to our field options here. So we will add our area and sub area. And let's go ahead and collapse these. We want this to be above our area, just like our form is set up here. Looks like we'll have to change the name. So let's go ahead and scroll over a little bit and select our area. And this will just be area. And then for our sub area, we'll go ahead and change that also. And let's go ahead and play, and we'll see what this looks like. Ooh, looks like we have to adjust the placement here. So we'll put the sub area here. All right, that looks better. And let's play again and see how this looks. Yeah, so it's not bad, depending on the length of these areas. And again, maybe the duration doesn't matter. I actually don't think that it needs to be here. We can adjust that further away. So let's go ahead and move our duration probably after the area selection. Yeah, I think that looks a little bit better. And then we'll do the same thing here. So we'll go ahead and move our duration down one, or after sub area. And let's go ahead and play this again. And again, this is just kind of fine tuning. It's pretty much however you're looking for it to work here. But now we can see that we've got, well, we could probably put these on the same line. So let's go ahead and make some adjustments here. Again, this is all things we can take a look at. And I think this is probably 180. Actually, it could be a little bit less, but we'll go with a width of 250 here. Well, that's probably too big. Let's go 200. And 225, and that fits. Now let's take a look at our X and Y for these, because this should fit, but we'll go ahead and make this a little bit smaller just to make sure. All right, so our X and Y, so we have an X of 0 and a Y of 4, and we want this to be an X of 1. So we'll change that to 1, and we'll take a look at this and set it to 4. That way we've got them on the same line here. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and save and publish this, and then we'll take a look at how this looks in the app. I always recommend that you take a look at the final product inside of an app, and obviously do lots and lots and lots of testing. The more testers, the better, to kind of find whatever's not working in the app. Sometimes it'll work just fine in the studio, but when you actually go to the app, things don't quite work as expected. So let's go ahead and head over to our app now. Now, another customization that is outside of the app, we can actually adjust our URL here. So if we click over here and we go ahead and add our add hide nav bar equal to true and hit enter, we'll get rid of that navigation bar at the top there. So that's a little bit of a performance enhancement you can do that really does change the look and feel of your app. You don't need that navigation bar at the top of every single app. If we come to your activity here, let's see how this looks. So when we select something, everything seems to be looking like it's supposed to. Everything is displaying correctly. Now, if we want the most recent thing at the top, all we have to do is come up here and look at our newest to oldest, and there we go. Or we could, change the filtering on pretty much any of these options very, very easily. If we go to our admin screen here, we've got our area update. Everything is looking fine here. If we hit back and we go to our sub area, again, everything looks like it's working as expected. Now we could actually go through and test some of these out. So we didn't have an area here, so we could go ahead and select a task area, and then we could select our meeting here and hit save just to make sure that it successfully updates. And it did. So that is working as expected. And then we could hit the add button. Everything is working the way that we would expect it to work. Now, one thing we might have to do is add a delete button, but if you're adding it in there, most of the time you're needing it. So I don't know that you necessarily do need a delete button, but we could add that in there. So let's go ahead and add a delete option in here. So let's go ahead and copy this button, and we'll go ahead and paste that. And we'll just go ahead and move this to the other side once it's done building that. So it'll be our furthest one here, and this will be a trash. And let's go ahead and change this to, looks like I forgot to change the button tooltip here. So let's do that to delete activity. And I forgot to change our tooltips. And again, this is common when you're copying and pasting. So that's one of the benefits of trying to get people to test these apps, is they're going to find the things that you forgot to change. And this is one of those things that I frequently forget to do, is go through and adjust all of our buttons here. Now for our delete, what we want to do is we want to remove from our daily task completions our activity that was selected. And the way that we can do this is we need to adjust our add button. So when we add something, we want to make sure that our variable is set to blank, because we don't want to accidentally delete anything. So we're going to go ahead and set this to blank. All right, so when we hit the add button, it's going to set that to blank automatically. So if we delete something, we're not going to delete one of these. So if we select this, again, it will select this, and then we can delete it. And we'll delete this one since we forgot the area and our saber area. So let's delete this one out of there just to test that it's working. And there we go. Now, if we hit the add button here, we can go ahead and add something. We might want to make these required fields. So let's go ahead and do that right away. We'll say true for this, and we'll do the same for this one. Again, these are all things that you would normally catch during your testing process here, but everything seems to be working as expected. So again, we'll publish this. Now that's pretty much it for this app portion. I did realize I forgot to do one thing. So we want to have the ability to navigate and add an area and a sub area directly from here when we're creating it, because some users might be creating something and then realize they just started a new project and they haven't already added it in there. So what we want to have happen is we can go ahead and hit this button here and go to the sub area page directly, add it, and then go back in here. And again, this is going to be automatically refreshed as soon as that's done to include whatever they've added in here. So all I did was add the buttons here, and the syntax for this is just to navigate to the page. Very simple process. The one thing we have to do now is the security role. And again, the security role is going to limit everybody down to being able to see only the things that they're supposed to be able to change. So let's go back to our solution. And now what we want to do is come up here and we want to go into our admin center, and we're going to create our security role from our admin center instead of in here. All right, so in our admin center, what we're going to do is go into our security roles, and we're going to find basic user. And if it is taking a while, sometimes if you toggle this, it'll speed things up, but we're going to find our basic user, and we're going to go ahead and copy this. And for this one, we're going to call it basic user task tracker, and hit copy. And then we're going to go open this up, and we're going to add our tables that we created. So we created 3 tables. One of them is area. And actually, if we search for our OSP, that might be a little bit faster. So we'll show only unassigned. And we still got quite a few options in here. So maybe it's faster just to search for area. And here is our area table. Now we want all users to be able to create at the user level. We want to be able to read at the user level. We want to be able to write at the user level. And then for our append, we also want to have it set for user. And our append to, we want user. And for assign and share, it really doesn't matter. We're going to leave those blank for this one. Now let's go ahead and find our sub area, and it'll be pretty much the same thing, user across the board here. And now we can go ahead and find our daily. And again, this is going to be the same way. So it's all user across the board. And let's go ahead and save. And let's go back to our solution. Now in our solution, what we want to do is we're going to want to add an existing security role. So we're going to find our security role option here. And let's go ahead and search for basic user. And we've got our basic user task tracker. So let's go ahead and add that in here. And we should see the security role pop up in here. There we go. Now we've got it in here. Now, if we wanted to share this, how would we do this? Basically, we would come over here and we would go to share. And I always go to classic sharing. I find it a little bit easier to work with. So we click on use classic sharing. I typically don't send them an email, but you can go ahead and send an email if you want to. And let's go ahead and select somebody. So we'll just select a random person here. And again, these are all fictitious names. I'm the only one that has an account on here. I've added this on there for demonstrating how to do filters and searches of larger numbers of people. But we would select Alyssa, and then over here on the assigned security role, we would find the basic user that we created. So we'd find basic user tab, and we would select that and then assign that to her. And it's really just that easy. At that point, they get permissions to both the app and all the underlying tables with one fell swoop. Now you can also add a security group. So if you've created a security group, you can put that in here, assign the permissions to this, and then everybody that's inside that security group within Enter ID would have access. Now, for example, if this app was for the entire organization, I could select a security group that has everybody in the organization in there, and then everybody that joins the organization is going to get added to that, and they'll automatically get access to this app. So it's really just that easy to share this off. Now, if we wanted to have more permissions, what we could do is create another security role. And instead of setting it at the user, we could give it a different type of setting. So we could give them the ability to see every user, for example, and then we could build an interface where they could check the users, and maybe you want to have the managers, so you could use the manager hierarchy so that the managers could see their employees, but we would just have to build an interface to allow for that. All right, that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully you found the content helpful. Don't forget, hit that like and subscribe button if you find this content helpful, or if you think that this is something you're going to come back to in the future for how to build apps or any of the other content on the channel. It really does help the channel grow. Until next time.